Imagine this kid is you, okay? And your parents are some of the most wealthy people alive. They got billions upon billions of dollars, and they just have companies left, right, and center with their name on it. They are essentially the motion man and woman, and because of that, you don't have to worry a day in your life about money. But the thing is, their idea of happiness is to help others, to spread awareness, to fundraise, to create orphanages that actually help the children, to being a doctor and saving lives in the field. That is what they do. And because of that, they don't spend as much time as they want to at home with you. So you are entrusted to your faithful butler. Let's call him Jarvis. And this little guy here is basically your babysitter, but also one of your best friends. He's there for you. He does his best to care for you as if you were his own child. And everything goes as well as you expect it to. Pretty good, honestly. But eventually, they actually managed to get some time off. All the things that they needed to do have either been put on hold or are finished. So now they have time to spend with their child. Hooray! How amazing is that? And because you are their only son, they give you the ability to plan out the day. And you decided, let's go watch a movie. Maybe even a theater play, maybe a musical depending on your weird continuity. You are strutting your way down to the play, but something happens. And you're like, I'm kind of scared. Or maybe the movie ends. You're like, you know what? That was so fire. I'm over here playing make-believe because I imagine myself to be that character. And all of a sudden, you see a random guy come up to you to ask for directions. Your parents being as friendly and as nice as they can be, of course, helping the starving, giving people money on the street. They are more than happy to do that. But eventually, as they get close, he pulls out a gun, and you guys find out it's a robbery. And instead of backing down, he actually stands up. Your father, he wants to show a good example. You can't let other people step all over you. You have to fight back. And because of this, while he was putting up a little bit of a decent fight, it ends up with him dying. And then your mother. And now you're left all alone in a dirty alleyway where you could have just been at home chilling and now turned into a nightmare. And this is where it starts a cycle where a lot of people call the hero's journey. Like my storytelling, thank you. I'm a theater kid. No, I'm not. Imagine me being a theater kid. I would not be able to stop yapping. But more or less, that was essentially the story of Batman in the most prolonged way to explain it possible. But we see him in the ordinary world, right? Eventually, he gets a call to action, which is the death of his parents. And that leads to him not really having a refusal to call because he is deadlocked. He is set in finding the best ways, even as a little kid, to get better, to get smarter, to get stronger so that this won't happen to anybody ever again. He meets mentors. He goes around the world to become something greater. And then it leads to him finding his own first threshold. And eventually he meets his own tests, allies, enemies. He approaches the innermost cave. The ordeal. He has to deal with all of these core conflicts in one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And because of the superhero genre, you don't really move on to Act 3 of the hero's journey. That cycle doesn't really get completed. Maybe it will in a story. Maybe we'll see the road back of them coming home and having to deal with certain troubles. Maybe we'll see a resurrection. Of course, we've seen that multiple times in the past, where there is a symbolic type of gesture or event that happens that changes the entire perspective of a character. Daredevil, for example, Born Again is a very iconic saying in the franchise, right? But because of the circular storytelling of superhero stories, kind of like this little wheel here, they are stuck in Act 2. They have to deal with the core conflict multiple times. The life or death of themselves, their physical body, their emotions, their ideological stances, their mental health, all of that heroes have to deal with on a daily basis. And because of that, they are consistently and constantly suffering all the time. There's never really a breather for any amount of time that's worthwhile. It's always just to the next conflict, to the next. And it makes them really strong sources of willpower. Fictional mentors that we can look up to, but we would never want to be in their shoes. And because of that, there are so many characters that will fit the description of today's topic. And that is comic characters who have suffered the most. They are in a song of pain, and that will never change, but it leads to very interesting, compelling, and emotionally resonant storytelling. That's why we come back to it. We like to see our characters get tortured, because at the end of the day, the story will end with them being stronger, with learning something new about themselves, about people, maybe they learn a way to reaffirm what they previously thought. That's what makes it special. All of this stuff is for a purpose, but sometimes some writers, as I'll talk about later in this video, just want their characters to hurt a lot and for no reason. There's no lesson, no nothing learned at the end of the story. Let's get straight into my picks, but don't forget to think about yours as we go through the video. And obviously, timestamps, remember that guys, and be sure to check out my discussion posts. Let's get to it. A character that we don't talk about enough in terms of trauma, and a character that's actually getting a lot more attention because of the Superman movie and her, 30-second cameo, is Supergirl. And I am thankful, I am so grateful that Woman of Tomorrow is the comic that's going to be adapted for James Gunn's new universe, because this is where it's at. This is the story that I think goes in the most detail of the destruction of Krypton in the most graphic way possible. And with my discussion on this topic, I want to dismantle the idea, to kind of get a little bit off topic, the idea of the Spider-Man writers meme. I know it's all fun and games and jokes, but a lot of people actually take it really seriously, like, oh, they're giving him Spider-Man writers. No, all he really has is a consistent, copious amount of bad stories that work to really downplay the character of Peter and doesn't really try to give him any respect that he's due. And while the Parker Luck thing can go really far, they can stretch it towards sometimes self-parody. Spider-Man isn't even the character that has it the worst in Marvel. I could argue a lot more characters, and Supergirl right now, what I'm about to describe, is actually insane. But I will get to Spidey in a bit because he does have it rough. But first, we have to remember, not only was she a survivor of Krypton, she lived on Krypton. Imagine this. Place yourself in her shoes, right? Your life, and implant that onto Supergirl. You have friends, you have family, you have a job, you have coworkers, you have hobbies, you have, forums, you have discussion posts, you have Reddits, you have YouTubers that you watch, maybe you have streamers that you tune into all the time. You have all of these little bits and pieces and connections that make your life truly whole. There's all these experiences in your life that you went on that enriched it that you wouldn't have had if you didn't do that in the first place. Supergirl, she did just that. Kara is as Kryptonian as we are human. We're always looking forward to the next thing to improve our lives, both in terms of progress, in terms of being a better person, and in terms of just overall blunt fun. She was 14, 15, 16 years old. To break it down even further, in the words of the Dark Knight, when Dick Grayson was telling him that he told her that his parents died, she acted like it was really nothing. And he's like, maybe it's because her parents died, along with her extended family, all of her friends, everyone she knew, everyone she ever met, and about 9 billion complete strangers. And brother's over here like, I get it now. Dude, not only did she survive a Holocaust that she has supreme survivor's guilt over because she felt like, why do I deserve to live over everybody else? There were so many people there that were much smarter than me, much stronger than me, much more affectionate and passionate, and more bubbly and happier than me. Why is it me that gets to survive? Clark has the same thing, but he will never experience it in the same way because he was born on Earth. He is more human. Kara, in and of herself, is kind of like the inverse, his mirror. She will always be more alien than human. He will always be more human than alien. While he is trying to balance out the Kryptonian side of his life to get more in touch with his culture, his Kryptonian culture, Kara is going to a world that judges her for acting too much as she was in her previous life at times. Obviously, this isn't like the Marvel universe where they're hating every second, but there is going to be some pushback at the beginning when she's just starting out. And she's also a little bit more angsty and angrier than him as well. She means well, but there is a little discrepancy in the way that she acts and the way that humans are kind of expecting a hero to act towards them. It wasn't like a huge fundamental shift because Superman Clark, he was there to guide her every step of the way. Yes, there were moments where she went on her own and she had to deal with her own problems and her own rage, but Superman was fortunately her guiding star. And I'm going to read to you a little excerpt from Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I'm not going to spoil anything because this is the foundation of the new movie, but I'm going to tell you how she explained how the people of Krypton died. We all know Krypton blew up. I'm just going to explain to you her experiences through this little excerpt of her riding through the cosmos. So it goes like this. The quakes came hard and swift. As she walked home from school, she could hardly keep upright. The streets cracked. She watched dozens of her neighbors consumed by waves of steel and crystal screaming for help as they were dragged into the fiery depths of Krypton. She kept walking. A man called out to her. She turned, seeing someone familiar, the manager of a local solar fuel store. A chunk of rock has cleaved through his belly, and he was clutching onto his guts. His guts, I'm telling you, bro. His guts. She was in an episode of Mortal Kombat, fatality and all. He was trying to stuff them back into place. He told her he couldn't hold on. It was all slipping through his fingers. He begged for her to help. Could she just put her hand here? That's all, just a little help. He fell at her feet, and there was blood on her shoes. She kept walking. She passed a rocket stroller tipped over, and she did not hear any cries from the babe, who must have been inside. Maybe its mother had taken it to someplace good and safe, or maybe its pain was mercifully over and its eyes shut forever, or maybe it was keeping still because of the clatter of ruin had grown too loud, and that was just the life instinct it had at the moment. Supergirl, she never found out. She kept walking. Krypton had held thousands of generations safe in its bosom. Epics were written, idols were worshipped, wars were waged. Heroes were celebrated, stars were discovered, histories were researched, lands were conquered, families were raised. The edifices of ambition were built and destroyed, and built again and destroyed again, and built again and destroyed again. There was love and jealousy and hope, and tears and agony and laughter. There was the view out her window, in her room, in her apartment. So all of this happened just like that. It was like seeing a visible terrorist attack where you were completely unharmed. You saw all the atrocities, but not a hair on your head was torched. But the problem with all this is that Supergirl suffered through the death of Krypton 3 whole times. So what happened here is that her father made a giant bubble around her hometown, the capital, Argo City. And in that city, there were currently 18,000 citizens. But the problem with this is that as Argo City was kind of split from the surface of Krypton, it floated out into space and reached a yellow sun. The last remnants of Krypton were turning into kryptonite. The ground itself, the very earth beneath them, was poisoning them, and that led to the death of her mother. I said before, there were 18,000 citizens that survived the destruction of Krypton, but 13,000 died from radiation. So now we're down to 5,000 people, but thankfully, her father was still alive, and her father was doing a lot, and I mean a lot, of the construction and all the safe haven stuff, right? To keep the people of Krypton safe. And he was like, you know what? I discovered this. If we use shielding, particularly made out of lead, we could shield ourselves from the kryptonite, and they didn't even know what it was. But unfortunately, a year later, a giant meteorite shower just rained onto the city, the size of giant bullets, and it led to it chipping away slowly but surely at their shielding, and the radiation returned. And it ended up killing everybody else 3 times, witnessing a natural massacre. That is crazy, but she was saved by her father that put her on a ship and sent her out. He used all the kind of pieces that he had left to make a 1-passenger ship. That was all the amount of time that he had, and it was really cramped, as you might expect, the same that it was with Kal-El. But she is literally a 15, 16-year-old teenager. It's going to be really cramped in there, especially considering that you are a lot more mobile than an infant child. And she had to go on this entire journey being stuck in space and eventually being found. In some continuities, Superman finds her. In other continuities, she crashes to Earth. But this is what I'm telling you. This is how we understand the angst of Supergirl. I know there was a lot of people talking about the way that she was depicted, Supergirl that is, in the Superman movie. Now, I hope you guys could realize why she was acting the way that she was, which wasn't even annoying. I felt like that was just normal sibling banter, but to give a little bit of an extra layer on top of it so that they could cover all of their bases, they said that she was drunk, she was going to Red Stars so that she could lose all of her powers. Of course, this is something that happens in Woman of Tomorrow as well, but the way that she was acting, that was completely sibling coded. I know they're cousins and all, but that felt natural to me. But yeah, man, Supergirl, she had it rough. Our next character follows under the same archetype and trope as Supergirl, which is being the last survivor, but not exactly, and that is Martian Manhunter. So before we get too far involved, let's talk about the backstory of the Martians. So the Martians, they started off as, if I'm getting my cards right, as a very violent and emotionally unstable race, right? They just wanted death and destruction. They were known as the Burning Martians. They had fire-based abilities along with their entire repertoire of other hacks and weird powers, but their main goal was to conquer other planets and essentially the entire universe, and to really produce more Martians of the same caliber through asexual means. With enough fire and destruction, they can just birth out more people, which is crazy to say, and each Martian has that dormant inside them right now. Even to the modern day, if there's a Martian alive, they have the ability to become a burning Martian if they actually fight off and win against their fear of fire. It's kind of like Kurama in Naruto, like having the tailed beast kind of stuck within you. It's like that because it's also its own separate personality and being that John had to fight in not only a mental battle, but also a physical battle when he actually ripped himself out of the body and laser beamed him. That persona was called Furnace, and I have a video about the dark side of being a hero and all the dark transformations in the description down below. But to kind of like speed it up a little bit, the Guardians of the Universe made it so that they now had a crippling fear of fire, and because of that, they became more docile and they were a peaceful race. But on top of that, they also installed, I made this joke before, the racism patch. They literally made it so that there was white Martians and green Martians, and white Martians were looked at as less than, and there was always this back and forth fight between them. I don't know why this ever was, because a white Martian can like change into being a green Martian and vice versa. I don't want to say you'll never know because they probably have some sort of racism vision. That's a crazy word to say. But they probably have something to tell if you're trolling, right? If you're actually not who you say you are. But to go back to John's story in particular, what people don't know is that he's actually a set of twins, right? His name, John Jones. It means the light to the light. You could, in effect, be the last hope of a people. You are the brightest star in this metaphorical solar system. But then his brother was born a bit different. He was seen as a mutant because he did not have the ability to communicate through telepathy. He was built incredibly different, and because of that, he didn't have a lot of the abilities that Martians have. Martians didn't really speak. A lot of their communication happened through brain power, and his name was like Malfik. That's how you say it normally, but his Martian name is like Malfak, something like that. And it literally translates to the darkness in the heart. I'm telling you, if fictional planets and people decided not to like segregate or discriminate against people that were different than them, it would just be so much better because you're giving these individuals a lob to be cartoonishly heinous. And then you're surprised that they turn on you. Why can't we just normalize being different? And then there would be no problems whatsoever. But what his brother did was create something called Haran Mir's curse. And I'm going to read to you a little excerpt from John Ostrander's run. His run is honestly the definitive Martian Manhunter run and is really good. So let's read it. The source of the plague was something called Haran Mir's curse, named for our god of fire and death and art. It was telepathic in origin. The Martian weakness to fire is both physical and psychological. We are telepathically drawn to the flickering, uncontrolled image of chaos. Our thoughts become fire at the expense of all else, even the beating of our hearts. In the case of Haranmir's curse, our very bodies erupted into flame. It took all I had to block the sounds of the screams and howls, the stench of burning flesh, the feel of ash coating my skin, the thoughts of the doomed eating at my mind like waves of sand. It was the last day of our lives, of the Martian race. So, similar to Supergirl, all of his people die, and he's surrounded by it, running through the fire with a cape over his head. And all of it's mental, you have to realize this, and it creates a huge willpower diff between the people of Mars, because if you have enough willpower, which he does because he is a manhunter, and in Mars, right, this planet that we all know and love, that we're supposedly supposed to land on pretty soon, let's see if that ever happens, but you need to completely shut off all of your telepathic abilities. But the problem with this is that Martians have like 11 or 12 different senses. They have a completely different way of experiencing the world, and their telepathy is a huge part of those senses. if you get rid of it, not only will they experience like physical pain because it's something they're not exactly used to, and your body obviously is going to fight against things that it's not accustomed to. But to give you a little bit of an analogy, imagine being blind, deaf, not being able to smell, not even being able to touch or feel anything. That would be the equivalent of shutting off your telepathy. It's horrible, on top of physical pain. So people just give in, as John said right here, to the detriment of themselves, to their hearts. Martians turn back on their telepathy. And the worst thing about this is that he has a wife and child. And the problem here is that they could not, for the life of them, fight against it. John painfully witnessed the destruction of his wife and daughter, both of them succumbing to the plague and dying in his arms. They had to feel better one last time, but that in effect redirected the pain they once felt and multiplied that by 10,000. They were in a constant state of burning, and luckily for John, at that exact moment, he got beamed straight to Earth. This is where his origin happens, and he gets brought to Earth, and he doesn't know how to get back to Mars. He doesn't want to go back to Mars, and he's scared. He lives his life as Detective John Jones, becoming a full-fledged human as a disguise to fit right in. It's really sad. We see him transmute his body so that he could develop the faces of his loved ones. He talks at them, and he hugs them his own hand. And it's really disturbing and sad to see. In his first run, which was a miniseries by JMD Mateus, I've told you this man is one of the GOATs. In my last video when he wrote Spider-Man, he wrote one of my favorite Spider-Man runs of all time. But in this 4 or 5 issue run, he gets a lot of visions of this black looking demon, angel, whatever hybrid. He doesn't know what it is, but we learned that it's Hronmir, right? The god of fire that we learned about, who Malfic named the curse after. And he was kind of a fourth and coming villain for most of this run. But we learn a little bit later that it was all a misunderstanding. His main goal was to bring John back to Mars so that he could undo everything that he did. What did he do, you might ask? Well, his suffering, his pain, his trauma was so much that it created a weird psychotic telepathic loop that spawned a spiritual tether to all the souls that died during the plague. And because of this, the ghosts were just wandering around Mars. They couldn't get a proper send-off. They were also in pain. They really just couldn't make it to an afterlife. Imagine how insane the trauma and the power must be to stop an entire race, millions, maybe even billions of people from moving on to the afterlife. That is an insane feat of strength, literal trauma scaling. I guess that's what we're going to do in this video, go bar for bar with the amount of pain each character has experienced. But John, man, for being the literal heart and backbone of the JLA, the Justice League, he's gone through a lot. And the sad part about this is that you wouldn't even be able to tell. He keeps all of that hidden so well because he gives so much advice to other people. He makes them so happy. He makes them so assured of themselves. He does all of this stuff. He speaks in a very elegant, kind of monotone-like voice for the most part, that you would think that he was a very enlightened soul, somebody who's been through everything that you might have experienced and more, but who came out the other side as an angel, as his name suggests, light to the light. But he had a huge chip on his shoulder, and finally letting go, letting his entire psychic connection off that planet, working hard to let them have peace, he himself was able to experience his own personal heaven. Moving on to the Marvel side for a little bit, let's talk about Wolverine. Wolverine, his life literally started out with pain. Now, this is going to be a laundry list of the worst things that has happened to Logan because there is so many stuff that I just have to knock through a bunch of them. So we're going to start at the beginning. And as you guys know, the mutant gene is very unpredictable and powerful and really just deadly. If you don't know how to control it right off the bat, it will lead to immediate casualties. And this is what happens with Logan. The X gene isn't really something you can pinpoint. It happens very randomly in life. And while it does start off as a recessive gene, it becomes more and more dominant as the years go by. And for Logan, it happens in a moment of extreme distress. Now, he sees his dad get shot, and that ends up with him killing the guy who shot his father, who was actually his biological father, Thomas Logan, right? He saw his mom commit suicide after she was driving him away with a shotgun. She was so scared of what her son had become. She ended up taking out her own life. he accidentally killed the love of his life because those claws, if he doesn't control it properly, they'll extend on its own. He had an entire wolf pack in the woods when he was living by himself after his family died, only to find all of them dead at the paws of a polar bear. This man's life is a movie, and this is just his origin. Later on, if we move a little bit further down the timeline, his girlfriend Silver Fox was murdered by Sabretooth, and Sabretooth is one of the biggest ops you could possibly have. I had a discussion on evil counterparts that you could also check out, but Sabretooth, the problem with him that's really grimy is that he'll always do something crazy on his birthday. If we go to recent times, he ended up killing like a bunch of like Wolverine's descendants, like kids and stuff like that, and he made their limbs into a happy birthday logo. This first time, however, he smeared the blood of his girlfriend Silver Fox to spell the words happy birthday. Every single birthday, Creed ends up trying to find new ways to outdo himself to traumatize Logan. The Marvel Universe is literally like an alternate timeline of our mainline reality. Everything that happens here has happened there. He served in both world wars, being tortured by Cyber in World War I, to like spending time in Nazi death camps, to fighting on the beaches of D-Day, to being hit by the bomb in Hiroshima. He survived a point-blank nuke. Look at this man's body. The physical excruciating pain that he has to deal with is on par with the psychological damage of a lot of the characters I'll speak about later, and what I've spoken about before. Furthermore, he gets imprisoned in a Japanese camp, he gets tortured multiple times, he gets shot up accidentally in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which, if you don't know, is when Al Capone had a bunch of his gang members to kill a bunch of other gang members. People didn't really know about it, and it was just an active shooting at that time. But yeah, he got caught by a stray. Mirako Yashada, the one true love that he had, the person that he actually ended up having a kid with, she ends up getting poisoned. And out of her honors, I'm pretty sure, Logan honors one of her requests to die by his hand. And it's completely heartbreaking because it only gets worse. So you have to remember, he was also an assassin. He had to do a bunch of grimy stuff that he didn't want to do. But because of his attitude, the way that he presented himself, and the unique abilities that he had, he was usually the right man for the job. To being accepted and actually kidnapped into the Weapon X program. He was tortured on end and then injected with adamantium, and this adamantium was extremely painful. Most individuals, if not all, ended up dying by the procedure, but he had a healing factor. And the cool thing about this, the adamantium, is not only did it actually lessen his healing factor because it had to deal with consistent adamantium poisoning, but something that a lot of people forget is that it actually helped to dampen a lot of his bestial instincts and the way that he was regressing, or depending on who you ask, progressing into a more animalistic being. When he got all of the adamantium ripped from his skeleton by Magneto, which is also a very crazy thing to experience, he regressed. He got bone clots, his nose was like non-existent, and he became more bulkier. He seemed like he was about to become the up-and-coming brother of the Beast. It was that bad. Hank McCoy, you got a brother. In Uncanny X-Men, there's a very iconic panel and cover where he gets crucified on an X-shaped cross right by the Reavers, mocked, tortured, and left to hang on agony, and despite all of the healing, his body still screams in high pitch. He literally tears himself off. When is he ever going to have a happy day? In Volume 3, I'm pretty sure, in number 57, it gets revealed that Wolverine, when he gets injured to the point where he dies before his healing factor can save him, he could only return to life by fighting Azrael, the Angel of Death, and he gets trapped in purgatory, so every time he has any close call death encounter, he has to fight Azrael. And this is because of a weird, stupid deal that he had to deal with during combat in World War I. Eventually, he was able to make an arrangement for his soul to come back, but even then, a part of his soul had to be used to be forged into a sword that can now be used to kill people of similar power, people with healing factors, so even then, he's missing a piece of himself. So it makes it really morbid, but also very nice to hear that he lost a bunch of his memories through the brainwashing of Weapon X. Yeah, while for the longest time, he might not have known his true name, his family, his loved ones, at least he didn't have to deal with such a mental burden in the modern age. Also, his dog died when he was young. Talk about a Dio situation, huh? Somebody get this man a beer. Somebody get this man constant mental health help. Put him on a telepathic loop of soothing brain sounds. He deserves a brain caress by a telepath. Speaking of which, Jean Grey, he normally has to be the one who kills her, one of the loves of his life. because he's one of the few people who can get close to her Phoenix abilities. Talk about a rough life. Moving on to another Weapon X aficionado, we are going to talk about Wade Wilson, also known as Deadpool. So similar to Wolverine, Wade was a mercenary, former military man, right? And he was known for doing very violent and relentless jobs. And it left him very morally conflicted. And as you might expect, you'll get emotionally numb after doing something enough times. But then there's going to be a point where all of that numbness then turns into self-questioning. But obviously, even before he became Deadpool, he still had a lot of bravado, a joking attitude at times. So he just dismissed it and realized, okay, this is my job, I just have to do it. Eventually, karma caught up with him and he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So Wade was like, you know what, I don't exactly value my life right now, but I'm also, as most killers are, whimpering in the face of death. So I'm just going to donate myself to something called the Weapon X program. I don't know what kind of crazy stuff is going to happen, but at least I might have a chance to survive. And what happens here is that he's given the same healing factor as Wolverine. His DNA is getting sent into his body, but instead of his healing factor doing something like replacing his dying cells with healthy cells, it actually replaces those cells with more dying cells. It leads him to a situation that's very much paradoxical because on one hand, he is quote-unquote immortal. He's not immortal. He was cursed with immortality by Thanos because, he was getting in with Lady Death, and he did not want that. But in the current day, he does not have immortality. So if anybody tells you that Deadpool is immortal in any sort of discussion-based context, call them out on being a fake fan, okay? That is some ball knowledge I just gave you. Deadpool is not immortal anymore. He was for a little bit, but now he's just a normal healing factor Wade Wilson. So, on the other hand, he is quote-unquote unkillable, but he has to experience excruciating pain just by being a walking, talking tumor. You've seen his body, you've seen the scars, you've seen his physical skin. It's like seeing cancer that talks. It's horrible. But it's even worse because all of his nerve endings, his nervous system, it still works. It's not like he's numb to the pain. He feels every single injury, being decapitated, stabbed, burning, turned into a puddle, acid, being ripped in half. Look at this. This man got shoved face first through a metal bar. These were metal bars that were meant to keep him captive, and he was shoved straight through it. Look at his body. He is mangled up. Thankfully, he had the costume on because he looks like a straight mess. Furthermore, once upon a time, all of the bones in his body were literally taken out, and he was used as a cape. He feels all of the pain being thrown all over the place, and you have to remember all of his organs are still in there washing away as he gets moved. That sucks. If I'm going to give you a little bit of an analogy, imagine burning your hand, right? There's a spot on your hand, you touched like the oven or something, you touched a light bulb, and you burnt your hand. It sucks, and you don't really have any polysporin, and you spend a lot of the day just putting your hand under cold water. But after you take it out, it still hurts. Imagine that and hitting your hand, or cutting your hand in the same spot. It's going to hurt even more because there's already a wound there. That's the same with Deadpool. His entire body is already damaged because of the cancer. All of it already hurts. And then imagine putting pain on top of that. And not just normal pain, decapitation pain, Mortal Kombat fatality pain, but it's even worse because you can't even have the fresh embrace of death, right? You don't have the other side waiting for you so that you don't have to feel that pain anymore. You are alive. So that's like 3 levels of pain right off the bat. His healing is essentially a curse because in this one instance when he was working with Sue Storm of the Fantastic Four, he was in her room, right? And the Thing, Ben Grimm, finds him, and it becomes a little bit grim lately because he just rocks Deadpool so hard that it leads to him having not really just a concussion, a literal brain damage. His head is cooked, and we realize later on that he made a mistake, and he starts talking to Sue, and he tells us that he feels like his superpower is to consistently get rebooted, because when he gets hit in the head, all of that brain damage, it takes him longer actually to regenerate his brain, and it leads to him forgetting stuff in everyday life, and people get mad at him for forgetting stuff, but he has no control over the memories that kind of go away. And I'm pretty sure this is the explanation for his multiple backstories. Just like the Joker, he tells a lot of tales about his past, about him getting hit by his mother, or his parents leaving him, or, his father killing his mom, or whatever it may be. He says a bunch of gibberish, but none of it is actually true. But the reason might be because of this. because people realize that he has a healing factor and they go dummy hard on him because of it. I always had that weird inclination of why do people with healing factors get ripped in half with characters like Spider-Man or Iron Fist? That never happens to them because it's literally a free card to go as crazy as possible. For villains, they're like, okay, I'm scared of this healing factor guy. I'm going to have to go all in, and they end up doing some crazy wacky doodle stuff. For heroes, they usually have a code or a moral justification to stand up with, right? That is the level that they have to hold themselves onto, but when they go against a person with healing factors, they are able to let loose. It's not like he has an adamantium skeleton like Wolverine that keeps his ligaments intact. If he gets charged into by the thing, he's going to turn into mush. Wolverine, at the very least, has an anchoring system, a literal framework to keep his body from falling apart. Deadpool is not that lucky. In the Weapon X facility, actually, he had to go through a lot of excruciating pain. Of course, a lot of horrific torture, a lot of dehumanizing conditions that he had to live through. And all of the doctors in this quote-unquote Weapon X workshop, whatever that meant to the government, I don't know, they would make a lot of bets on who would die first, and these bets were kind of a ring called the Deadpool. That's how he got his name. And they had to deal with a lot of crazy things, eyeballs getting ripped out, the whole 9 yards. And there's this one guy, I forgot his name, and he was going through so much pain that he begged Deadpool to put him out of his misery. And Deadpool, he didn't really want to do that, but he was like, you know what, this is the most humanizing option, and he took his life. But the worst thing about that was that Ajax and a bunch of the other people like Dr. Killebrew were there, and they made a bunch of rules where it's like, you cannot kill any of the patients there. Everybody has to be on a constant truce, because if you break that rule, you will get tortured and killed. And what they did to Deadpool was rip out his own heart. But he had a healing factor that worked unlike everybody else there. So he was able to survive and get his revenge. Thankfully, there was something good about that. In Deadpool Black, White, and Blood, which is kind of like an anthology series with only those colors, black and white and red, one thing that really stuck out to me, I saw this kind of, bro, I was losing my mind. I'm pretty sure it was the Hulk or Juggernaut, somebody like that. They ripped his head out of its socket with spine intact. It was a Sub-Zero finisher. And you have to remember, Deadpool has to experience all of that. Remember that 3 layers of pain that I talked about? Not only that, but he also has to experience the pain of regenerating. Even in the new Superman movie, we saw that he experienced a lot of agony when the sun hit his skin, because the healing process is at overtime, right? It's putting the skeleton back together, it's putting the ribs back, it's healing the pockets of damaged lung tissue. Deadpool had to experience all of that. I even remember this one time where he had to chew off his own arm to escape from some aliens. Deadpool is the benchmark, I think, for physical pain. He is at that red bar of no return, man. There's only a couple things that I haven't seen him experience. Imagine chucking this man into a black hole. What would happen? Would he still stay alive? I have no clue. Maybe it would be the same effect as him being thrown into the sun. He would die because of that. So maybe there are things that he just can't experience, thankfully. But the mental fractures and wounds, the agony, they are still there. You have a complete catalog of everything that was done to you. You don't forget the pain that you experience. It leads to him having a lot of hallucinations and surreal scenarios that he has to go through every single day. Rabbits appearing, a bunch of women just jumping out of nowhere, a lot of just death and destruction as you open your eyes, and through a bunch of therapy, and of course Wolverine talking to him. He later decodes that it's broken memories, right, of his dead wife Mercedes, and his identity and all of the things of his past gets weaponized by his own brain against him. We see it in the Deadpool movie as well, where he's on a bunch of barrels and he throws a cigarette into it, right, a bunch of oil, and it leads to an explosion. He tries to take his own life because he does not want to be here anymore. All of his jokes, a lot of people don't realize this, a lot of the things that he says, the puns, the gross, inappropriate things on a daily basis that get spewed out of his mouth, it is a coping mechanism. He is a sad clown. I know a lot of people don't like this trope and they think it's overused, but for Deadpool, he's one of the main characters that you can't take this out of. That's why I don't really like the Deadpool video game that reduced him into a funny haha meme generator. That's not Deadpool. The Deadpool that I know and love makes funny jokes. He makes fourth wall breaks here and there, but you see through every single line that he says, there's a subtext about it where you'll realize if you fully go deep into his dialogue, there's a pain to every sentence. And finally, there's the emotional trauma of his relationships, right? With Vanessa, the copycat. He briefly found happiness because of this girl, but because of his past violence, his cancer, the Weapon X legacy, all of that, the emotional loss, it runs deep. And it drove her away. He couldn't help but be himself, and that leads to people around him just leaving him behind. Later in Despicable Deadpool, I'm pretty sure number 295, don't quote me on that, he gets forced to be in a very crazy predicament, either kill an innocent woman or see his daughter die. And he ends up killing the woman, and it's a moral decision that haunts him for the rest of his life. He later gets tricked into killing his own parents under the influence of the Weapon X+, and that leads to even more grief and guilt. It's even more devastating because it's through his own hands. Deadpool can never catch a break, but hopefully with his new duo, which if you don't know, his daughter is also Deadpool, they can make more happy memories. And all of these things can just be trauma of the past. But knowing Deadpool, just like Logan, it's never that simple. And since we're already in the mood of talking about X-Men, let's talk about some of the worst fates to ever happen to an X-Men character, and that is Magneto. Now, Magneto, as a lot of us know, is a Holocaust survivor, so a lot of the things I'm going to talk about happened in his childhood during the 1930s and 1940s. He experienced, as a child, attending school in 1935, I believe, he faced increasing amounts of anti-Semitism, which you might expect, right? He was targeted by his teachers and classmates for being Jewish. And despite being very intelligent and athletic, he's the person you really want to be in school. In any other circumstance, people would look up to him, people would want to be friends with him. But since he was who he was punished for doing well. Even after winning a javelin competition, the prize was given to an Aryan student. The Nazis rigged it, bro. It's crazy. And he experienced firsthand how people around the world will identify you and particularly weaponize your identity against you, right? All of your achievements will be for naught if somebody doesn't like your ethnicity, your background, or your history. All of that can play a factor in your downfall if enough people are against you. And he learns, right, at the very beginning, he has a base understanding now that society will not protect him or reward any good behavior or accomplishments that he might have based on the merit of your ethnicity and your religion. Max also had to deal with the Kristallnacht pogrom. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, and what this is, translated to roughly, is the Night of Broken Glass, and this is where Jewish homes, synagogues, businesses, all of that were destroyed. Family homes were ransacked. They took everything. In his own home, not only did that happen, his father was beaten and they were arrested alongside many other families. And imagine the horror, right? Picture yourself, you're watching this video on your phone. Maybe you're sitting at your table watching it on a laptop or a PC, your personal computer. All of these sort of privileges that you have, you feel very comfortable, and all of a sudden that is snatched in a violent manner. And you have to remember, these are kids experiencing full-on systemic brutality. Nobody had any clue that it would happen the day of. Obviously, there's going to be some smart people who are waiting and preparing for something crazy to happen. But even then, you can't break it down to a science. It just happened like that. And there's nothing to do about it. After this, he was forced into deportation to the ghetto. He was deported to Poland and forced into something called the Warsaw Ghettos, which is kind of the Nazis' way of oppressing a lot of Jewish people. They had like a huge system of ghettos all over the place, and they had to live in very horrific conditions: starvation, disease, violence. It became a daily part of their lives, the reality that they experienced every single day. Max tries to protect his sister Ruth, if you don't know, his younger sister, but they were often separated during, of course, raids, during roundups, and it led to him being in a constant state of survival mode. Only thing that he could think of was normalcy. How am I going to get that back? Privacy, safety, how will I ensure all of these things, not only for myself, but also for my sister, who is counting on me? As a kid, all we really thought about was beep bop boop bop, I'm playing my video games. Max was going through it. His entire family was massacred by the SS after a failed attempt to escape. Max sees his mother, his father, and his sister executed right in front of him, and then buried alive among the corpses. He had to claw his way out of a grave alone and completely traumatized, dude. That is crazy. I've talked to you before about Batman being stuck into a coffin buried like 6-8 feet underground, and he had to claw his way out of that. He was in a straitjacket, he was drugged. Yeah, that might suck, like physically, but this is mentally taxing. It's a trauma narrative that's built into his entire life. And then from there, he was captured and taken to Auschwitz, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. It was a very infamous Nazi extermination camp. And he was tattooed, right, with a prisoner number, and his number was, from my recollection, 214782. If I got that right, I deserve a sub. Okay, anyways, he was forced to become a part of something called the Sonderkommando. And what that was as a Jewish citizen was like he had to assist, I guess, in the disposal of bodies from the gas chambers, right? He was subjected to the most psychologically tormenting stuff. I couldn't imagine any of this. And the fact about this that sucks the most is that there were real people that had to experience similar things. So anybody sympathizing with Nazis, you all gotta go. Pack it up. Literally, physically, mentally, you're gone. I'm telling you, get out. This was their efficient method with getting rid of these bodies, right? A whole system of kids and adults just wrangling all of these corpses and getting them out of there. As you might expect, it shattered his soul. He ends up falling in love with somebody called Magda, right? Another prisoner at the camp. And they connect basically through the shadows, and both of them have a shared trauma experience. Their love in and of itself is very forbidden, and it's in constant risk of discovery because you're just supposed to be working, but this is the one flicker of hope that he has. This relationship does lead to his children, the most important ones, of course, being Wanda and Pietro Maximoff. This is one of the bright spots of his life, and they do end up escaping the camp. Their efforts do kind of fail, and it leads to more people getting executed, but eventually they make their way through the death march at the end of the war, and they get out. And while this should be a moment of like triumph, it's not really celebratory at all because that is still permanent trauma. But after escaping, Max and Magna, they had a daughter called Anya before, of course, the Maximoff twins. And what happens here is that when a mob discovers his mutation, their home is burnt down with Anya inside. His daughter gets killed just like that by the fire and fumes. She was gone, and enraged, Max retaliated by massacring an entire group of villagers. And this horrifies Magna, and it really begins to descend into a very militaristic advocacy of mutant kind. You hit me, I hit back harder. And that is his entire ideology. It leads to him losing Magna, and now he's on his own. The sad part about all of this is that, in effect, by fighting monsters, he became a monster himself. Unfortunately, when we tell stories about heroes, we hope that they stay on the beaten path, right? They make sure that they don't fall down to the level of their oppressors, but more times than not, throughout history, this is what happens, right? There's a rising tension between him and Charles Xavier. I know Charles Xavier, this is crazy. Remember when he shot the Holocaust beam? He shot it to his head, and then he had to experience every single painful memory. Bro was wilding because Magneto had to experience a roller coaster of emotions, right? The death of his daughter, Magna leaving him, the Holocaust, his parents and his sister dying, them ransacking his place, killing everybody that he ever knew. Even if they didn't die, he will never see them ever again. That's what Charles did to bro to discombobulate him. What a grimy, oh my goodness, brother. I rock with Charles, but he didn't have to make Magneto tweak like that. That is wild. The construction of Genosha, an entire city just for mutants, so that they can live away from the humans, so no conflicts can occur between them. That was him being like, okay, this is our truce. But even then, he had to experience another genocide on another half of himself. The mutant kind. His mutant people were killed in droves. And not only was it a mutant massacre, it ended up dwindling the numbers to only hundreds of mutants, maybe even tens of people in the world. Imagine that, suffering through 2 Holocausts and still being able to keep his head up high in the current day to help and be with the X-Men. They have fought multiple times based on their ideology and the fact that he wants to kill all humans. If I was Magneto, I wouldn't care anything about what the X-Men had to say. The fact that he was able to just cave in and be like, okay, you're right, that shows great character development, and I'm glad he finally has that after years of just torture and pain. Mark Grayson, Invincible. Now this is the section that I tell you guys if you don't want any sort of spoilers that you skip ahead to the next timestamp. I won't be going too in depth with spoilers. I think I'm going to be very iffy on certain plot details, but I'm going to tell you some of the crazy things that Mark had to endure. So if you're fine with that, feel free to continue with the section. If not, skip ahead. Simple as that. But with Mark, the problem with him is that he suffers through a lot of physical pain that you would normally see with characters who have healing factors. And he does have a healing factor, mind you, but not to the same degree as somebody like a Wolverine or a Deadpool or like a Lobo, right? He gets done dirty. Even if you watched Invincible that first season with Battle Beast, when he slammed that mace on him and it caused a bounce, like what are we doing here? Is brother in an Insomniac Spider-Man combo? Like why is he bouncing like this? This was horrible. But the worst part was yet to come because he got betrayed by his father, Omni-Man. What we learn here is that he isn't exactly an Earth hero. He was a Viltrumite, sent here to conquer, and he forced Mark to fight at full strength, which not only broke his loyalty, but it left Mark very emotionally shattered. He had PTSD for watching such a huge amount of mass death. The psychological trauma of his father, mind you, somebody that you go to comfort, is actually fighting with you, scrapping and beating your ass. Like, this is crazy. Like, Mark was completely a disheveled mess. His face was as caved in as possible without it looking too crazy. The Superman Zod fight was bad, but Omni-Man was literally killing people in front of Mark to show him how useless and how weak they are as a species. Humans aren't really all that. We are the next evolution. They are so weak and fragile. How can we leave them to themselves? They should be under our rule. That's the only way they'll thrive. If we look at Zod, yes, he didn't really care about casualties or collateral damage. He wasn't really going out to kill people until the very end. He was like, you know what, I'm getting kind of clobbered right now, and I'm in a really crazy position. If anybody had me in this, I would be tight. So he was like, you know what, I'm going to use my final resort and try to laser beam these people. In Invincible, Omni-Man's entire goal is to kill people so that Mark will actually go to his side. It's a very weird back and forth if you contemplate it too much, but you could see where his head is when he was trying to convince him. It's like, we are so much more powerful, trying to play into that power fantasy. Why aren't you like me? Come on. He even says, what will you have after 500 years? And the worst part was when he used Mark as a literal shield, put it in front of a moving train, and every single person that actually collided with Mark turned into a blossom of blood. If that's not traumatizing, I don't know what is. And then we have Angstrom Levy, this guy here, one of the biggest haters of all time, for honestly his own fault, right? You're the reason why you're like this, by the way, buddy, but your brain is too big to even notice it. Is that crazy? You have so much intelligence, yet you don't know when you're the loser and the fool. But either way, Angstrom Levy was completely just torturing, kinda, at least mentally, Mark's family. He broke his mother's arm, he harmed his brother, and he was like, you know what, I am going to lose it. You've been doing way too much crazy stuff in your time here. And he savagely beats him up. Like, he thinks he kills him with the amount of mush that he made on the ground here. Like, his brains and his face looked like applesauce. I couldn't blame Mark in the slightest for thinking that he was dead. It was his first intentional kill, and I really like what Steven Yeun did when he played up to the psychology of the character and how he was really trying to rationalize what he just did. He's like, okay, I had to do that. No, wait, why did I do that? I'm stuck here, and trying to go through all of these different options in his head to see what he could do to get out of this dimension, no matter how demented it may be and how crazy he looks. Fortunately, he has a group of friends that come from the future, right? Adam, Eve, and all of those guys come to save his life, and then he goes about his business, as usual, deals with certain threats here and there, as you might expect, the superhero life, and then the Invincible War happens, and Angstrom returns, but with alternate versions of Mark, and then we learned here that every single other Mark from every other universe is evil. He is the anomaly. Usually it's the reverse. But for him, it leaves him in a really weird spot mentally. He's like, wait, am I a bad person? And with that, it leads to him fighting armies of himself. It leads to the death of Rex Splode and other heroes, but millions of civilian casualties. They destroy landmarks all over the world. He has to clean up corpses with Cecil silently processing all of this, his guilt, his initial hesitation with working with Cecil, and the resulting destruction that happened. It makes him think, silently, I'm sure he was thinking that maybe I accidentally fodderized this entire planet just by not holding my ground and just deciding to dismiss certain things and just work with people that I find hard to work with. Yes, I'm not going to like everybody, but sometimes you got to do things for the betterment of humankind. And then right after that, he had no chance to breathe, and Conquest shows up, a very violent Viltrumite that even Nolan fears. They fight across cities. He even ends up like holding him and shooting him through a bunch of people, just like Omni-Man, so you know he got PTSD flashbacks just from that. Conquest even disembowels Mark, his hand straight through him, leaving him with near-fatal injuries. Mark survives through his like regenerative healing factor, and he was grappling really hard with his responsibility and his role with being Earth's defender, not exactly a conqueror, but every single time a Viltrumite comes, they're asking, oh dude, did you actually conquer the planet yet? What are you doing? We're giving you this and this amount of time. If you don't get them ready, you're going to die, and everyone here is going to get cooked. In the next season, we're going to see somebody called Dinosaurus, which is honestly one of the biggest, funniest parodies ever. I inexplicably love this character, but he's still a mass murderer. His actions lead to the death of nearly 1 million people, 800,000 to be exact, and this leads to Mark having to end him, right? He has to do all that he can to stop a genocide. His complicity with death, an intense burden that he now has with moral responsibility, is now wavering even more. And then we gotta deal with Thrag. Thrag actually leads to the death of a very important character that Mark sees as family. I'm not gonna tell you who it is, but it's crazy. Thrag ends up pulling up on Mark and ripping him in half, and the only reason why he was able to survive through all of that was because of Adam Eve's abilities. This man went hard, and the final battle, which was really crazy, was at the surface of the sun, and Mark had to fight Emperor Thrag in brutal hand-to-hand combat, right? But the hard part about it wasn't exactly throwing hands, it was the fact that they were struggling under extreme heat, and that leads to him almost dying. His flesh is charred. He's literally bald. Like, that's like the worst punishment you could ever have. And these guys are just tearing flesh and breaking bones. I've never seen a character pulled into so many things that he never asked for in my life, because he was forced to kill a lot of people that he just didn't want to. He didn't want to break such a staunch moral code. He wanted to be better than his father, but every single point and turn, he had to deal with decisions that made him look like his father. And that would obviously lead to anyone being discouraged. You wouldn't want to be a hero anymore because you feel like anything here or there is going to tick me off and I'm going to lose control. They are testing me way too much. I'm not trying to King Von all over the entire planet. Invincible isn't really invincible just because he heals and because he has super strength and invulnerability. It's because his soul literally refuses to break. And yes, I have called him a fraud in the past because he gets beat up way too much for being called invincible, but I was kind of joking. Yeah, his win-loss record is kind of crazy for being a hero, but at least he gets back up. That's the thing that we need for every single one of our guys here, right? You need willpower to save the day, and he has it in spades, in abundance, so I can never fault him for that. Bruce Wayne, as many of you guys know, his trauma is very foundational for the most part. The murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne, right? As an 8-year-old boy, he witnessed his parents gunned down right in front of him in Crime Alley, and as a lot of us know, actually as all of us know, let's be honest here, every single one of you knows, this moment shatters him emotionally, and he says this, "All sense has left my life." That's how he describes himself later on in Batman Year One. It defines himself forever, right? His worldview, his guilt, his isolation, his violence, his PTSD, his emotional detachment at times. It's all because of this. The trauma becomes an ongoing hallucination, and it kind of like resurfaces as flashbacks, as nightmares, as moments when he's dying out. He sees his parents, right? In Night Terrors, in Ram V's Detective Comics, they often come through like triggering panic or existential dread or some sort of magical mental manipulation. You'll be sure to see Thomas and Martha Wayne there. In Rucka's run, I'm pretty sure, in Death and the Maidens, he relives the same moment, but he's in a trance, right? Talking to his parents in memory, just walking slowly. Tom King's run, we learn actually a little bit of backstory gets retconned in here, where in a letter to Catwoman, he reveals that he attempted suicide as a child, and the passage is like this. "I was 10. I got one of my father's razor blades, and I got down on my knees. I put the metal on my wrist, the edge scratching cold, the blood on my hand, and I looked up to mother and father." You know that picture that we all see? That giant, like, monumental image of his mother, father, and him? Whoever painted that was kind of saucy, but he said, "I told them I was sorry. I was so sorry. I was on my knees in Gotham, and I was praying, pushing my hands together now, the blood and the blade warm between them. I prayed." And this moment right here is when Bruce Wayne died and Batman was born. That's the mental framing that he made it. Of course, Bruce Wayne is still good and healthy, but that moment, that was when that dark demon fully started to form. All of his negative emotions started to build a bit of an armor that got fully forged once he made that vow to his parents to make sure that no child ever had to deal with what he just went through. It really gives a cool new layer to Batman and how his survival is not just default, it is a vow. Every single time we see him will his way out of these circumstances, it's because of a vow as well. The vow never to kill, the vow to, I don't know, maybe hold up the Hippocratic Oath of his father. All of these things are now complemented by his will to live. I know a lot of people had a problem with this, but as a human, right, I'm pretty sure if you see your parents die in front of you, that is a natural response, no matter how grim and dark that might be, how over the top some people might see it. That is a reality that a lot of people have in the real world. And to call that plotline stupid goes against the many people around the world that had to deal with this issue who have went through similar things as Bruce Wayne. So you're just disrespecting a whole lot of people just because you disagree with this plot point. Furthermore, there's also Batman the Cult, one of my favorite Batman storylines. It's a 4-issue miniseries, and it shows Batman getting kidnapped by Deacon Blackfire, and he gets mentally tortured through like starvation, dehydration, isolation, hypnosis. Bruce is finally broken, eventually succumbing to Deacon's will. And it's one of the few times that we see him truly break. He gets tortured and hypnotized to the point that all of his mental defenses that he automatically has takes a bit of a backseat. And he becomes one of the cult members and actually ends up killing on behalf of Deacon. That's how crazy this is. And him taking a life with a gun, by the way, is traumatizing. He has this kind of mental tick in his brain where it's like, if he pulls out a gun and he ends up shooting somebody with intent to kill, he can't do that. He stops himself. He has this weird mental setting where that is not possible, and doing that will be the worst cardinal sin that he can. And Deacon just broke him to the point where that was just a light work. He was once trapped in the sewers, arms tied around his back with a bunch of bodies and rats all around him. And he's like, hell, hell, welcome to hell, welcome to hell, welcome to hell. I'm in hell. Dude, for somebody as stoic as Batman to start rambling like this to become a full-blown yapper, that's when you know the pain is serious. And then we have the death of Jason Todd in Death of the Family, and the paralysis of Barbara Gordon in The Killing Joke. Now, that moment in The Killing Joke, when he was told by Gordon to do it by the book, there's multiple different ways to approach how this happened. It was either The Killing Joke, what the story actually portrays, and he ends up killing the Joker because of this, or it leads to him beating the brakes off of him. A lot of this, he feels like it's his fault because he didn't take enough proper precautions. Of course, Jason, through looking through the Bat computer, found a lot of material that was needed to find his mother, and it led to Jason being killed, crowbarred by the Joker, and blown up in that warehouse. And while some people might tell you that Tim just came right away, he just brought Tim into the legacy of Robin just like that, he didn't become Robin fully until like maybe a year or so after, and for comic book time, that is a lot. Superman had to stop him and bring him down because his self-destructive tendencies would not only end up with the death of the Joker, but also himself. He was tiring himself out onto no end. In Nightfall, he had to go through the ringer, an entire gauntlet out of all of his best and strongest villains. It left him tired, only to find Bane in his home, beating him up, taunting him, and eventually leaving him paralyzed, shattering his spine, and throwing him out on the dirty Gotham City streets and telling him, this is your savior, this is the guy that you all worship. I beat him. He is broken, Gotham is now mine. This is now all my prize. Do whatever you must. This is still a city where citizens will thrive and exist, but know this, I am now the king. This arc really exposed Bruce's fragility, right? The unmasked portion. He's physically and mentally vulnerable. It's his greatest weapon, his body, his mind, and his humanity. All of that was just taken from him. And the 90s in and of itself was just a torrent of pain. In Contagion, the next big event, Gotham is hit by an Ebola virus, and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of citizens died. It's so bad that Gotham citizens and the Bat family had to work together to get a bunch of the bodies, put them together, and burn them, just so that they don't get infected or to even take the risk that anybody else contracts the virus. In Cataclysm, a 9.2, I'm pretty sure, magnitude earthquake hits Gotham. It leads to an entire rupture of a lot of the buildings, everything falls down, hundreds of thousands of citizens die. Dude, I'm telling you, this is literally hell on earth. So much so that the metaphor actually becomes reality. All like the pipe and gas mains start to leak, and then it starts to catch on fire. All of Gotham becomes ablaze. And Bruce Wayne, being in the Batcave, he gets buried under a bunch of debris, and he's one of the last Gotham heroes to see his city on fire. The mental damage that Bruce experienced, because you have to remember, this happened year after year, there was no letting up, to eventually No Man's Land. And in No Man's Land, Gotham is completely cut off by the rest of the United States of America, right? They are left to fend for themselves. Gotham has to create their own code, their own trading system, right? To trade food, weapons, all of this stuff. They get no help. It's a one-man fend for themselves scenario, where there's a bunch of territories taken over by Gotham's biggest and harshest villains. And there are territories here and there taken over by, of course, the Blue Boys, who are the Gotham PD, and Batman. The entire story was him trying to save as many people as possible while racking up as much territory as he can to take back his city so that everybody doesn't have to live in fear of being mauled by a supervillain. And you might think just because it's the turn of the millennium, the 90s is done, the pain will be over. No. Coming off of it, what do you think is going to happen? Well, my dear viewer, Lucius Fox has a heart attack. Jim Gordon, one of his best friends, gets shot and almost killed to the point where he is so sad and so mentally discombobulated that he could not solve his murder. He had to stay by his bedside holding his hand because he is, in effect, the closest thing that he had to a father other than Alfred, right? He would have been the same age as Bruce's father. And right after, to make it even worse. He gets framed of the murder of Vesper Fairchild, his former girlfriend, who came back to talk with Bruce. And man, this led to him having a complete psychological break. He's like, Bruce Wayne is dead. Batman is the only thing that exists. And it leads to him going on a whole epic character arc where Bruce ends up actually coming out of the fire more whole than ever, being more sure of himself and the Bruce mantle than he ever had in the past. But the trauma is just stacking. War Games occurs, and essentially this is a all-out gang war on the streets of Gotham, and Black Mask ends up terrorizing, torturing, and killing Stephanie Brown the Spoiler. Yikes. And you know what? Just to make it worse, in Grant Morrison's run, at the very end in Batman Incorporated, it ends with his son, Damian Wayne, dying. He's like 10 years old at this point, and what sucks about it is that right before this, they were learning a lot more about each other. Of course, Bruce didn't even know about his existence until he was dropped at his doorstep as a 10-year-old. And they were really starting to understand each other after Bruce being out of the picture because of Batman RIP, because of Final Crisis and him being sent through time because of Darkseid. They finally got a moment to really have a father and son bonding experience. But that is just taken away. His life is cut short. And man, there's this one issue in Batman and Robin. It's a complete silent issue. And it shows the slow degradation of Bruce's mental health. Him finally succumbing to his rage and destroying lots of the Batcave and hugging the mantle of his son's suit in the Batcave while his dog watches. And the reason why this happened all of a sudden was because he actually finds a letter from Damian before his death where he's like, I know we don't always get eye to eye, but I will always love you. It's way more detailed than that, but it was the final straw to send Bruce over the edge. Thankfully, due to Bruce's persistence and him going to Apocalypse with the Hellbat armor, using the Chaos Shard, and all this crazy power stuff, because you have to remember, they are in the DC universe, and there are ways to resurrect characters if you're persistent enough. When everything goes back to normal, Alfred is killed by Bane, his neck is snapped, and his death has been maintained for 5 or 6 years. He was the mental rock. He was the bridge that kept the Bat family together in their darkest hour. And with him gone and out of the picture, it leads to them falling out more so than they've ever had in the past. In the modern era, he has multiple circumstances where he sees the child version of Bruce Wayne and he talks with him. He's like, was everything I did all for naught? What's the purpose of this? Should I even do any of this? Because Batman, what is it really? It's making meaning out of tragedy. And the young Bruce Wayne tells him, if he stopped, the murder would have been for nothing. His parents' death. Their legacy would have been disheveled and disgraced if Bruce Wayne decided to stop. It's just a very fascinating character study, to be honest. If I'm going to break down everything I just said, Bruce Wayne's pain, it didn't really end when he was at, Crime Alley, right? It's alive with him every single second that he breathes. One point in time, he tried to take his own life, but suicide wasn't the answer, so he became the answer. Batman is kind of a memorial, I guess. Every broken bone that he's experienced, every time the city breaks him, every single time that we see the city under attack and it falls. I know a lot of us are tired of the Gotham events of the city, oh, it's under siege once again. But every single memory loop and time distillation of this happening, and it feels like we're never really progressing at times, he comes back every time the city breaks him because he believes trauma means something, and if he ever stopped, all of it, his parents' death, would have been for nothing. Oh boy, the character that you guys have all been waiting for, the character that if you get too close to them, they will die. It's kind of the same with Batman, honestly, but it is Peter Parker, the spectacular or amazing, depending on where you're from, Spider-Man. Now, the first thing that we have to go through, of course, is the origin, right? Everything that is Spider-Man is built on guilt. Bitten by a radioactive spider, given extraordinary powers, but then, soon after that, he dismisses a fleeing thief, and that same criminal ends up killing Uncle Ben. It is the worst moment of his entire life because he is completely 100% responsible for a death that could have been prevented. But from a positive mindset, everything does happen for a reason. This was the defining, traumatic moment that shaped his moral code, which forged him his own identity, and he realizes with great power comes great responsibility. And from that point on, Peter doesn't become Spider-Man out of choice, but out of penance, out of purpose, right? The fact is, he does not want to repeat the same mistakes twice. So much so that he will never give up. Willpower is 100 on this, okay? And we really get to see this in his first real physical struggle, and that was in Amazing Spider-Man 33, If This Be My Destiny. Very iconic. And what happens here is that he's trapped under a very massive piece of machinery in a warehouse. We've all seen it. Very cool. It's been imitated in so many different Spider-Man media. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. But Peter just refuses to rescue himself. He accepts his own fate. And then he comes to his senses and he lifts the wreckage completely on his own, sacrificing all that he has. With tears in his eyes and agony in all of his muscles, his costume starts to tear. But then it kind of reaffirms that the heroic suffering that defines him, it shows that pain is a measure of integrity. Then we get to the night Gwen Stacy died. One of the most iconic, tragic moments of all time. Gwen Stacy gets hurled off the bridge by Green Goblin Norman Osborn, and although Peter does catch her with his webbing, the sudden stop snaps her neck, and she dies in his arms. The suffering right here is what reshapes Spider-Man forever, because not only was this the first tragedy, the first tragic death of his lover, the fact that he's also a part of the problem directly messes with his head. If he didn't try to catch her in that way, she might have survived, but was there any other opportunity to do anything of the sort? How else would he be able to get down there faster? Maybe slingshot himself down and catch her? I don't know. What could he have done? Was he too out of his own mind at that moment to really understand the physics? Which, I'm going to be honest, this is kind of goofy. It's a really good moment, but I hate whenever they apply real-world physics to superhero comics and they forget about it later. It's like, yeah, you want to have your cake and eat it too, but you can't really do that if like the next 15 or 20 issues, you're going to show him like catching people after they're falling off a 100-story drop. You know what I mean? Knowing how strong Peter Parker is, even if he does catch them at that distance, they are going splat in his arms. It's going to look like a Splatoon lobby, but in blood. That was kind of dark. But the next one I want to talk about is the death of Jean DeWolf, with, of course, this police captain being one of, if not his best person that he knows on the police force. At this time, Captain Stacy is already dead, and she was brutally murdered by the Sin Eater, and at this point in time, Spider-Man faces grief outside of the superhero battles. It feels a lot more personal, a lot more real. It's one of the darker, more realistic Spider-Man stories, and his obsession with understanding her death reflects a lot of the painful importance of being unable to protect certain innocent lives in the field. And speaking of can't save everybody, let's talk about the Spider-Man vs. Wolverine one-shot. And in this story, there's somebody called Charlie, and Charlie brought a lot of attention to herself by a lot of foreign governments, and all of them wanted her dead. And as you might expect, Logan and Peter were working their best to try to keep her alive, but then we notice that she has a clear death wish in this storyline, and she just wants it to be done with, right? She wants to sacrifice herself so that they don't have to deal with the burden. Wolverine was like, okay, if you want this, I could just kill you, it will be over with, it will be quick and painless, I'll give you a quick death. Spider-Man was like, no, there must be another way, and they have a huge brawl and fight over it, and it leads to all of them being separated for a bit, but then Peter, his spider sense starts going off, and thinking that it's Wolverine, he tries to clock him with the strongest hit that he could, so that he could just knock him out and get him out of the way, so that he doesn't have to deal with it. One shot, one knockout, right? One KO for the bag. Unfortunately for him, he thought that he was going to be hitting some strong muscle, healing factor, and adamantium bones. Instead, it was Charlie sneaking up behind him so that he would kill her. She uses him as a tool, and this is one of the only, if not the only moment in Spider-Man comics where he killed somebody with his own hands. And intentionally, mind you, of course, with Gwen Stacy, that was completely on accident. He had not exactly killing intent, but he had a lot of force behind it and he was trying to make it land. Unfortunately for him, it was just Charlie behind him, and this haunts him to this day. In Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run, he talks about it with Matt when Matt was going through his own hardships, when he was talking about the fact that he killed somebody in that same run and he was going through it as well. And as I've mentioned in my previous video, Green Goblin may be one of his greatest villains, but Harry Osborn was the person who really took that mantle to the next level. And he was fighting the Green Goblin curse, right? It was passed down to him by his father, and he rigs Peter's home to go kaboom! That was cringe. To explode, okay? And in the final confrontation, he realizes all the lucidity is now back, and he has a moment of clarity, and he realizes, wait, not only is Mary Jane in the building, but also his son Normie. So he sacrifices himself to save Peter, MJ, and his son. There's no speech, just silence, him in the ambulance and dying with his eyes open. Peter's grief is completely mute. His best friend was now gone in an act of redemption. Anything negative that he could have felt about him was now gone. It all dispersed because he saved not only MJ, but also his son, and he got his mind back on track. And speaking on Green Goblin, let's talk about the Clone Saga. Now, in the Clone Saga, what really hurt Peter the most was when he figured out that he was actually the clone and Ben Reilly was real. And this leads to a lot of self-doubt, and it leads to him spiraling out and even attacking and hitting MJ. This is really bad for Brothers PR. This sucks. But I could understand where he's coming from. Not that you should ever hit anybody ever, especially a woman, but the way that he was collapsing, all of the stories that he felt and he knew about, that he had within his brain, the fact that he was the one that married MJ, he was living somebody else's life. It's like stepping out of the driver's seat just to let somebody else take over, and they're just gone now. He felt like his entire life was a lie. Thankfully, we learned by the end of the story that Peter was the original. The entire idea of Spider-Man editorial was to actually make Peter the clone so that he could live happily ever after with MJ and his kid. But of course, a lot of Spider-Man fans are mad about that, because how would you feel if the person you were following for like 30 years, maybe even 40, was not even the original article? I would be hella mad. I don't know about you, but Norman Osborn shows up and declares himself as the mastermind behind the entire Clone Saga, and when he was about to kill Peter for revenge, Ben Reilly ends up sacrificing himself to save Peter's life, to restore it, and the emotional fallout of it all is very profound. The betrayal, the isolation, the identity erased. It kind of punctured a core in Peter's sense of self. He just didn't know who he was. And on top of that, Norman kills his son. He doesn't even know about it, but it does lead to a miscarriage in this run. Norman, man, you gotta stop, bro. You can't hate somebody that much, especially since your first death, quote unquote, was actually your fault. And you didn't even die from it too. You got retconned. Why are you so mad? But anger can be justified, and this is what happens in Back in Black. When in Civil War, his identity got revealed, and a sniper bullet went straight for him. He dodged. He was in his room, but it accidentally hit Aunt May. And he was like, oh, no, 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 no. And he figures out that it was an assassin hired by the Kingpin, and he was consumed with fury, and he almost killed Fisk in cold blood, but he pulls back, realizing maybe I'm wiling out a little bit too much, but he's like, you know what? Being a hero, I have to remind you that it doesn't make you safe just because I have a no-kill rule, okay? If she dies, I'm shooting a bunch of webs down your throat, and I will turn you into a literal balloon. You're already round, let's go a bit rounder, shall we? And then right after that, unfortunately, back-to-back, trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. Same with Batman, it's happening here. One more day happens, and with Aunt May on her deathbed, Peter bargains with Mephisto, and the price is to erase his marriage with Mary Jane and erase their child, their potential child, from reality. And history rewrites itself. They were never married, they never had a daughter. Years of having this love and growth, it just vanished. All just for the sake of this granny, bro. You didn't have to do this. This was her second time basically dying. Why did you have to save her back again just so that we could ruin your character development for decades? Peter, get your priorities straight. He really didn't have it. He wanted to stay a kid forever, huh? But then he had to rebuild alone, right? After the deal, he awakens. He's reset in this new life. Aunt May lives, but is kind of more distant because, of course, she's doing her own stuff. And Peter, all of the friends and allies no longer connect with his secret identity. Obviously, over time, it does get a bit better. He proclaims who he is. Eventually, MJ returns single. Peter mourns a life that he can't really remember that much. He's isolated, nostalgic for somebody that he once was. It's grief, man. It's grief, man. I created a new hero. But it's recovery built on loss. In Dan Slott's run in the new era, one of the craziest things happened, which is, of course, the Superior Spider-Man storyline, where Dr. Octopus switches his body with Peter, and Peter dies in Oc's body, because you have to remember at this time, his body was getting horrible. It was degenerating over time because of the constant blows and fights that he had with Spider-Man. Imagine that. He's fighting him so much that the hits to his head and his body has literally made his body have more dying cells that regenerate over time, kind of like a Deadpool scenario. He looks like Deadpool. Brother is an actual tumor with 2 legs. Not even 2 legs, he's working completely off of the 8 arms of his new suit. It looks kind of like a cocoon, but he dies in that body, and Otto continues the battle as the Superior Spider-Man, and his soul, his spirit, is always there in Otto's ear, watching him literally desecrate his legacy over and over and over again until finally he does get it back. Then we have Zeb Wells. Zeb Wells, just his entire goal was to create rage bait, and it worked tremendously. So he created a character called Paul, right? And Paul's entire goal was to cuck Peter in that alternate dimension. She was trapped in an alternate dimension, and that was the only person there. And they ended up having kids. They weren't exactly, biological in any stretch of the imagination, but Paul gets to have happiness while Peter is by himself. And then we have stuff with the Vulture where he gets humiliated crazily. And Vulture here, man, he was going after his loved ones, trying to beat the brakes off of Peter. And it's really weird to see Peter get very desperate against Vulture so quickly. He wasn't even using a new suit or any new weapons or equipment that he hasn't even seen before. And the fact that he had to disrespect himself even further by working with Norman Osborn and using his tech and using his glider, like, what are we doing, Peter? He has no self-respect anymore. Spider-Man fans, why do you even read Amazing Spider-Man still? I would never. This is torture P, bro. I would not do this. Spider-Man is not going to get better until the next writer, and even then, that's kind of iffy, okay? We're just going to hold on to our L as Spider-Man fans and keep it rolling, okay? We got to move on to the next character, and this is going to be my second propaganda of the day when I tell you, instead of reading Peter, read Wally West Flash, Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, I don't know, Tim Drake post-crisis as Robin, Nightwing Dick Grayson, heck, Virgil Hawkins Static, maybe even Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes. Read anybody else with Spider-Man, you'll get a similar experience, but with a new twist on it. And with more progression, I'll tell you that much at the very least. Because his entire life, as we've seen here, is a tapestry, in my opinion, of loss and pain. And he wears it as a uniform, right? He carries the grief on his mantle, on his sleeve, as he swings. Every loss that he has drives him onward, not even as a hero, but literally a survivor. That's what I see Peter as, because there's no wins in his career. Yes, I don't think he suffered as much as some of the other characters I spoke about who went through supreme genocides. He's not even in the top 10 in my opinion, but the fact that he's doing bad even now does make him seem a lot worse than the others. At least they have natural character arcs where they make sure that they have a win eventually. Peter, they're just not going to stop. That childhood mistake that cost the life of Uncle Ben, was it really worth it? I'd say so. The one above all, they showed all the people that he saved just for being alive and as Spider-Man. But from what I'm seeing here, there's not a lot of thanks and not a lot of help for what's going on with him, okay? And at this point, it's just cosmic horror because somebody out there has it out for Peter. And it's not God, I'll tell you that, it's someone else, a bit down below. But anyways, guys, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live, and make sure to leave in the comments your favorite character that has so much loss and grief that you can't help but stand by them and be like, yes, let's go whenever they pop off and win against the threats that threaten their happiness. But yeah, thank all of you for watching, and see you all later.